Hi, I'm Beth Rudden. I just was on the Smarter Online Safety podcast with Jocelyn King, and we talked about data as an artifact of human experience, as well as some tips for parents as well as CEOs to help with all of these very scary online things that are happening.
Hello and welcome to the Smarter Online Safety Podcast. I'm your host, Jocelyn King, and I am so excited to be with you today with our incredible guest. We have with us today Beth Rudden. Beth is the CEO and Chairwoman of Bast.AI, and she has over 20 years of IT and data science experience. She's a global executive leader. She's a former IBM Distinguished Engineer, a chief data officer, and a practicing cognitive scientist. This woman is super smart. She has a proven track record of giving wonderful design and delivery of operationalized AI systems. And she focuses on making AI systems that are sustainable, ethical, and can be adopted by every human. And that's one of the reasons she was recognized as one of the 100 most brilliant leaders in AI ethics. And I am just so thrilled to have her here on her mission to redefine the experience of the human for our shared future and talk about cybersecurity, ethics, and AI. And boy, that's a first question. First of all, welcome, Beth. And can those three things go together? Cybersecurity, AI, and ethics?
Absolutely. I think we are definitely at an age where, don't you feel like the millennials kind of broke open this binary, like, kind of career path? Or think about like gender fluidity. Why can't we have career fluidity? And we were discussing prior to this about acts, and I do think you get 3 acts in life. So 0 to 30, 30 to 60, and 60 to 90. And I think we are we are meant to do many different things, because that's how we learn when we are younger, through flow, and then when we are older, through experience. So I think it all goes together.
That is awesome. That is awesome. Well, and when people think that we've been talking a lot on the show about AI and how it affects our safety from a cybersecurity perspective and how it's affecting the world. And of course, there's a lot of upside and downside with every new technology. That's always the case. And so ethics becomes even more important. So tell us, what is AI ethics?
AI ethics is a set of rules and systems that you choose to design into how you want the artificial intelligence to behave and how you want the people to behave. I always think about ethics, and it comes from the Greek word ethos, which can loosely be transcribed as atmosphere. So I give people this example all the time. How do you know that you don't walk into an operating Catholic church in your ratty jeans cussing? Like, and ethics is like culture. It's what you do when nobody else is around. And so you want to create, and I like to describe it that way, because we need to think about whose ethics, and we need to think about who is setting up this atmosphere for us to be able to use artificial intelligence. And one thing I ask all the time, and I try to do it as questions, because I really want people to find out for themselves instead of being told what the answer is. Who does it serve for the ethos or the ethics of AI to have it be okay for us to use 15 swimming pools full of fresh water, or all the electricity in New York City, or all the data on the internet to build these large language models? Who does that serve? And how is that okay? And how did we get into a world where, people are looking at the darlings of the stock market, like Palantir, that is on Amnesty International for crimes against humanity. And so we have this weird paradoxical world where we have the transparency for people to see who these founders and who these leaders truly are. But we're choosing to say, but you know what? If I bet on them right now, I can have my stock market or my stock portfolio increase.
Mhm.
So I think ethics in AI is also about the questioning of the ethos or the atmosphere that we find ourselves in, and then hopefully empowering people like you and like me and the people who are really driving a different narrative. How do we give people the understanding that they can choose to create their own?
Mhm. I love that. That's great. And so there's so much, AI is moving so fast, kind of moving at a speed of light almost. And well, more importantly, our culture is changing at this incredible pace,
That's
fastest
right.
ever recorded, ever known. Um, what happens when we're implementing AI is, we've talked a bit on this show a bit, is you have things like deepfakes and stuff. You got these powerful tools, and you've got cyber criminals taking advantage of all these things. So one of the things that happens with ethics is because there is so much discussion, understandably, and things that have to happen and take their due course. And when you're trying to align a large group of people, especially if it gets even worldwide or even within a single industry, that takes time. In the meantime, the cyber criminals are exploiting everything they can
Right.
every minute of every day. And you've got a background in cybersecurity too. So you've got a very unique perspective at seeing the cybersecurity risks and also the importance of that in cybersecurity risks, especially in the short term, and the long-term, needs for good AI ethics and standards and things put in. So how do you think we should balance this?
I'll tell a story. I was in Copenhagen, large bank, I'm sure people could guess. And I was talking to them about changing the paradigm so that we could measure the behaviors of the people that we wanted to incentivize. So if we wanted to see more people patch their machines, put a leaderboard up and see if we could get the positive reinforcement going. Because if you have an entire company where everybody is doing things in a way that is rewarded for good safety hygiene, good cyber hygiene, good things, people with malicious intent tend to pop. That signal pops really, really fast. And so I had the CISO and the CIO, and I put them in the same room and I said, listen, how often are you guys communicating with each other? And they're like, what are you talking about? We're running around doing all the things. What are you talking about? And I said, listen, I go, for your CIO, they want a fully articulated CMDB or configuration management database, the holy grail of every IT system in the world, where they have all of the systems fully understood, fully patched, your CPU architecture, your OS, everything is wonderfully secure. CISO looks at the CIO and says, no freaking way. You are not giving all of these cyber criminals a roadmap to our crown jewels. And through that conversation, that's how we came up with this idea of like positive reinforcement.
And just real quick for people who are listening, we've talked about CISOs occasionally, but just to define it for anybody new, it's a chief information security officer who is parallel to the chief information officer, and very different roles, even though they're just one letter removed. But anyway, so go ahead, please.
Yeah, that's apologies. I definitely think about it in these terms of that. Even at the highest levels, I worked with a lot of CISOs because when back in the day, there was a lot of talk about sharing vulnerabilities and sharing the exploits, because if they could share through like a consortium, then other banks who haven't been attacked can be able to have some resistance to that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really interesting idea, but I don't know if it ever really took off. And I think that, understanding too that employees are human beings and they're often playing a role, and what role they're playing truly matters. And a lot of people don't get this yet, but the information in large corporations is no longer at the top. It's no longer at the C-suite. It is distributed to everywhere. So somebody who is, got the will and the discipline, they can find out more information about that company or more information about that company's C-suite than I think a lot of people would be comfortable with. And I think that that's where we have to think about. I always get really frustrated that I do have a background in security. I always say that I minored in security, but Jocelyn, it makes me angry because there's so much we could be doing, but there's so many things that people want to be reactive to as opposed to proactive. And so that's part of the reason that I'm building AI is I'm sick of talking about it. I want to show people that there's a different way to do things.
I love that. Can you give a for instance on the reactive and proactive? Because that's such a great point. I want everybody to be able to grok that.
So if you're reacting to if you're having to patch a system that is like a 0-day exploit, or it takes 0 days for somebody to come in and exploit that vulnerability, then you have already had to have like a response package in place. And most companies do not. They're reacting on the dime. They're not responding.
Got it.
And so to be responsive, and I mean, to put space between the stimulation and the reaction, right? So that you can truly respond, you have to plan.
Right.
And so, yes, right.
And if you're playing along at home, it's like if your your stove catches on fire, the people who are running out of the house are different from the people who are like already had a plan of, if we have to evacuate for any reason, we do X, Y, and Z, or or any kind of emergency preparedness that you learn in Red Cross or something. There's like a stop, drop, and roll for fire, or there's 5 steps you do. And the people who are trying to evacuate and had no plan for what they're going to do if they ever have to leave is exactly what you're describing. And yet this is happening at large corporations spending hundreds of millions of dollars on all of these systems and stuff, and yet not having that kind of response plan built in that ultimately is going to keep you and me and everybody listening safe as a consumer.
It's interesting because like there's almost a pervasive, like being a cost center means that you don't get the budgets. And then you often find out that there will be like hidden budgets for marketing for cybersecurity protection because they have like very specific IP that they don't want to go out for particular products or whatever. And it's interesting, shadow IT, shadow AI, shadow, like whatever it is, because there's not a true understanding of all of the people in the boat for the mission of the organization.
Right.
And it's sort of like critical thinking and regulation. The best regulation in the world is a critically thinking human being. So if you have an entire country or an entire company full of critical thinking human beings who understand and are trained, and that's why I'm loving what you do with the education, because education is how you get to critical thinking and sharing the stories of how somebody took a screensaver and took down a bank because they had the screensaver be able to, it was so cute. It was, I don't know, it was something like a fish thing. This was back in the day in like 2016, 2017. And
fish, right? Screensaver.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it went like wildfire, and everybody wanted it in customer service. And then you could see it. We used to do these visualizations where we're like, the virus started here, and then it spread to this department, and then it spread to that department, and then it spread to that department. And it was a screensaver. So you could literally visualize that particular one because people were using the compute of the computers while the screensaver was on. So when everybody left for the 3:30, 4 p.m., they would put their screensavers on, and then they would take the compute. But I think that I have so many stories, and one thing that I do want people to know is that there are so many things that you can protect yourself with, as long as you are educated in understanding how to respond, not react. It's going to happen, and this is where I used to sell DR, disaster response, by walking into a company and say, it took 4.5 minutes to fail over from this site to this site. Let me show you my work and showing you how we did that failover. And people were like, what?
Wow.
And that's a different way to show that you're really prepared, because safety always. And if anybody has ever been in an emergency situation and they encounter an EMT or a pilot or anybody who is trained for that,
Right.
Jocelyn, they're trained verbatim. They're not trained to make shit up at any time. They are trained literally verbatim. And being married to a pilot, especially a medevac pilot, I know this very, very well. Where I'm always like, can't you just kind of answer the no, you have to know it verbatim. And that's super important for people to think about, especially in this era of generative AI, that there is high quality data out there. And those are the protocols that our emergency people are trained on, because it's muscle memory for them.
Yes. And when you do a drill and stuff, but
That's
when you're
right.
prepared, I liked what you said about I think you said the word inevitable, because one thing that most people don't think about is that you and I and everybody listening is getting hacked. We have hack attempts
Absolutely.
against us hundreds, if not thousands of times a
Yep.
day,
Yep.
not only for our own selves, but for all the repositories of our data. And only one, as we say in cybersecurity, the bad guys only have to be right once. So when they get in, it's not a question of if you're being hacked, you're being hacked. It's when is that hack going to get successful?
Correct. And
And
what are you going to do about it?
yeah,
What's your response?
exactly. And you may
Yep.
not even know,
That's
like
right.
when we talk about companies and ransomware, by the time the ransomware comes on, the cyber criminals have already been in the organization for usually 9 months, long enough to find out how much the company has agreed to pay, and that what their cyber insurance policy is and how much they'll pay when they're
It's
ransomed, so that the screen goes up. Most people think a ransomware person like gets in, locks the screen. No, they're doing recon and they're gathering all this data and collecting everything, which is far worse and creepier to me than somebody just hacking in, in same day.
I think they're professional. They know the price to win.
mm. When
That,
I got into cybersecurity from having been hacked, the biggest surprise to me was just what a thriving business is.
it's
Business is. It's an
ridiculous. Yes.
entire industry. There is a hacker. You talked about protocols. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's one of the reasons hackers are so successful. There's a hacker's playbook.
My son, we did the CyberPatriots. I don't know if you know about that
Tell
program,
people,
but
tell people about it.
so it's part of the Air Force. It's training the warriors of the future. And at 12 years old, I believe, check me on that. You can go on to any military base, or you can sign up with the Air Force for your kiddo to learn how to ethically hack. And so every Saturday for like 3 to 4 years, from like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., they were teaching children what happens when you put text into a URL, or what happens when you pull up a web browser and you put text into the URL. What is the protocol that it instantiates? What services is it going to? Is it going to a domain server that's name is recognized with a particular service? There's this whole understanding that my kid had, and he is 21 now. So he grew up in the time where there wasn't internet filters, there or parent locks or whatever.
Right.
Apologies, I was never good at those anyway. I'm really shitty at forms. That's like those are my crew. It's a total kryptonite. Like if I have to read anyway, I digress. But like that, I think that's how I had always approached it, just like I did with my kid, is like I wanted to teach them what to do and how it worked, so that if or when they got hacked, they could understand at least what was going on and have enough. And unfortunately, by the time he was like 14 or 15, he had so many email addresses that I could no longer keep up with him, but he has really, really good knowledge. And I don't know if there's a lot of programs like that, but I will say that program, we hired ethical or white hat hackers out of that program at 18, and they were making more money than most plumbers do today, which is
Wow.
quite a bit.
Yes. And well, that's good to know too, because we had last time I checked, over 500,000 cybersecurity related jobs in
That's right.
the US alone that need to be filled. So when everybody's worried about, jobs going away from AI and stuff, I said, believe me, there are plenty available.
Oh, there's so many.
You
Yes.
don't
And
have to, and it's not about being a hacker or a software engineer. These are analysts, these are researchers. You can have
that's right.
any job skill and work in cybersecurity, which most people don't know. So
And
that's
a shout out for the social scientists and or girls or women who are listening. The very first thing that they teach you in CyberPatriots is what social engineering is.
ooh, good. We've had some clips of that. We had a head of social engineering company
Yeah,
on playing a clip
nice.
of calling in as a IT person and
Mm-hmm.
manipulating somebody at a company into giving information. So yeah, social engineering. Oh, and especially, for anyone, but also, women and girls are,
Mm-hmm.
through nature and nurture are,
Any vulnerable population,
yes.
any vulnerable population in that is not part of the dominant paradigm.
That's true. That's true. And we're also conditioned to kind of be, seek approval and,
Mm-hmm.
be nice and be accepted and
We've
use.
been socially engineered.
Yes, we are socially engineered. So we're easier to be socially engineered. However, that also makes us great social engineers too. So it's a great
That's
field to be.
right.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That is
Um,
great. What else do you see happening with AI? So while these AI ethics discussions are going on,
mhm.
about how to use AI ethically. And we're talking about the chat GPTs and Claudes and the large language models. And then, everything that's to come, which is going to get really
Yep.
exciting and spicy in a couple of years. But while all that is going on, we've also got, AI tools from hackers and fraudsters. And you brought up social engineering. So, we're showing examples on this channel. And we're also, people are seeing it in the news of the deep fakes and, and all the things that are going on. What what advice do you have for people? I mean, we kind of have to, we're relying on a lot of, government and corporations and, and everything to put protections in, but we've got to protect ourselves on our own doorstep as well. So what advice do you have for people listening about how to protect themselves in this, in these interesting times we're living in?
Ask questions. Who uh, my daughter, when I allowed her to put Snapchat and Instagram on her phone, had to give me a 5-page Google slide deck of why was a company created, who's benefiting,
Oh,
where does the money go, and 3 examples of good and bad. And typically when she got to the where does the money go, she's like, Mom, these are kids. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, Mark Zuckerberg was 19 years old. And I'm like, whoa. And it reminds you that if I gave my 21-year-old $1 million, who, by the way, is an ethical hacker and 82nd Airborne in our US Army. He's a
Thank you
good
for your service.
he is a good human being. But if I gave him $1 million, he is not going to use that wisely. I can't imagine if I gave him $1 billion. So look at the people who are creating the companies, and look at the engineers who are creating these models, and look at we live in the age of transparency, Jocelyn. And so if a company is like, hey, we believe in diversity, which is not all that popular anymore, and then you look at their entire white guy board, no, they don't. So people who are doing what they're saying are very easy to find in this world, because they're actually talking and doing the same thing.
There's espoused values, which usually will sit on a wall somewhere.
That's
and
right.
The implemented values, which
that's right.
that they really.
And ask the questions.
I love that, by the way. We have a lot of parents listening.
Yeah.
And I love that to put things in place, because you're also helping your kids learn how to research, how to.
That's right.
You're teaching them critical thinking. And you're not, you know what I love about that too? You're not just saying no, right? We live in this land where you're either saying no or yes too much. You're either too soft and giving in all the time, or you're saying no and you're just giving them a reason to resist. But when you're teaching them how to come up with a why, so that they're answering their own question. And that's, my gosh, that's the most valuable life skill you can give anybody. So I love that as a great parenting skill. Also something to even do, with employees, if you're a leader.
The higher the employee, the more like toddlers that you have to, everything you learned in kindergarten works. So I have a book, AI for the Rest of Us. I pushed it out in 2023, and I have a whole chapter on parenting, because it actually relates. It's common sense. So I try to give people good understanding of like, hey, look at the people, look at what they're saying, and look at what they're doing. If those two things don't match, something's wrong. If people are making hand over fist money without working hard, something is wrong. And then I think that, people do need to understand that there's going to be kind of the pendulum is going to swing where genuine human interaction will be valued. And that means that my mother, who reads so much and so quickly, who is 82, could have a very lucrative job reading for human understanding, because that's going to be more valuable. And so if you're thinking about how you would respond, many families have safe words or ways to really fully articulate what is genuinely going on. And then, Jocelyn, I think that there has to be a lot more stories about, I've been socially engineered. I found myself at King Soopers buying cards and sending them in the mail. And I was totally acting on autopilot. I was doing it. It will happen. How are you going to respond to your family member when it does happen? How are you going to repair that relationship? How are you going to say, oh my gosh, I feel like such a dumbass and I'm so ashamed that I did that, and talk about it so that we can not feel ashamed, because once we talk about it, shame goes.
Right. That's a great point, because also with all these deepfakes coming, you're getting calls from your kids.
That's right.
To say, oh, if somebody with I'll stereotype here, but somebody with a Russian accent calls me asking for money, I'm going to know better. And that may be all well and good. But if you get a call from your child or your parent or your best
terrifying.
Friend or your sister,
terrifying. That's right.
And, if I'll bring this example up again, but if the CFO at Ferrari was completely convinced that he was talking to the CEO of Ferrari, asking him to wire money on video, and because it was so well done. And the only thing that protected that company of Ferrari with this very smart was this very smart CFO asking, sir, yesterday I was in your office and you recommended a book to me. what
What
was
was
the
that?
title of
Yeah.
that book?
Yeah.
Because otherwise he would have wired the money. And that we're talking about,
Mhm.
millions and millions of dollars. And that's from a very educated, savvy person, with a high IQ, talking to the CEO, seeing him the way you and I are seeing each other here on the screen. So that's coming. And right now that particular thing is very expensive, or, it's worth it if you're not a CEO of a large company,
That's right.
not going to happen to you tomorrow, but it could happen in a couple of years. And it's coming. And the voice models are coming already. So you could have a call from your sister, brother, spouse, child asking for money, and you find yourself being socially engineered. So we were talking about preparation. So I think you can tell people have your version of that. There's a word that they have to, or something they have to know. What advice would you give people about what to do to prepare for the inevitable call that
Yeah.
they will get, that they're going to swear as a family member or a loved one?
So when I was I think in the middle of my career, I started asking the question, I was like, what is data? And I would ask data analysts, data scientists, data engineers, everybody, every data person I could find. I'm like, what is data? And Jocelyn, I got none of the same responses. So I declared, and data is an artifact of a human experience. And it's an artifact. And back in the day when I was an archaeologist in my prior life, we would dig up artifacts and say, okay, we have to correlate this to what people were wearing, saying, doing, thinking. And even then, we didn't know why that artifact was in the ground at that particular place in time. And the story that we would tell about that artifact would often say more about us than it would about the culture that we were studying, because
So
we
you're
didn't.
talking about like finding a spoon or something.
Yes.
But
Yes,
what we use spoons for today may have nothing to do with what they
that's right. That's right. And so what I think people don't quite realize yet is that data is a flow, it's not an event. And
say
there
more
is
about.
so data and humans are so being changed by the interaction of AI. And you mentioned this earlier, that it's going so fast. But I actually think it takes 6 to 7 years of a human being's life to learn how to read, at least in developing countries. And that changes our brain. It's a cultural adaptation. It's not a biological evolution. We are not evolved to read, right? And when we're learning about AI, we don't have an alphabet or phonics to teach people yet. And so what is happening is human beings are being changed in ways that we don't understand yet. And that means that the data that somebody might have about you yesterday is going to be entirely different than today. And so data and human beings are, I think it's this is all the way back from Toyota and like the 90s, and they called it automation with the human element, because they figured out that the single best software on earth is a human brain. So they automated everything that could hurt the human being because they needed the human to be the software. So we are always changing. So with your family, have a safe word, or talk to them every day and have a genuine connection so they can do what that really smart CFO did and say, what was the book you recommended to me? Do something that is innocuous, but also understood that unless somebody is totally surveilling you, which they can do, the data that they are collecting, it's just an event. It's a specific thing in time. It's not who you are.
It's a time slice. It's not your
That's right.
entire being. Oh, that's brilliant advice. Thank you. Well, that is why you're not only an IBM Distinguished Engineer, but you were recognized as one of the 100 most brilliant leaders in AI ethics. And I think everybody listening can fully see why. That was so awesome. Thank you for that. And bringing in anthropology, AI, ethics, and cybersecurity together. That is a first. And Beth Rudden, thank you so much for your genius work. One more time, the name of your book.
AI for the Rest of Us.
Great. And for people who want to learn more about you and follow you, where should they go?
LinkedIn is great.
LinkedIn. Beth Rudden, Rudden. That is so awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you to your son for his service to good people everywhere. Appreciate that as well. Wow, what a great conversation. What's a great tips and insights. I learned so much from you, Beth. Thank you so much. And everybody, I think you should definitely grab a copy of her book. If you want to go deeper on AI, you can see what a brilliant mind Beth Rudden's is. So with that, I just want to say thank you again, Beth, and everybody, until next time, stay safe out there.
Thank you for having me, Jocelyn.